Good evening. Welcome to the Monday, October 11th, 2021 Planning Commission and Commission for Citizen Involvement meeting. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Iris, would you please call the roll?
Fisher,
Here.
Heap,
Here.
Leek. Here. Pepe is excused. Phillips is excused. Stewart.
Here.
And Counselor Mahbub is present.
All right, thank you. So we have a quorum. First on our agenda tonight is a council update. And Councilor Mahbub, thank you for coming tonight. We appreciate you coming to give us a council update.
Thank
So
you.
please, if you can give us an update.
Thank you. Again, thank you for your work. We appreciate all the good and hard work you are doing. I don't have a lot. I just miss most of you. I miss maybe all the meeting in July and August. I was out of the country. So for council update, we, as you may know, we adopted the decision you made on the planning department regarding the authorizing the MOU for the 50 units. Unanimously, the council accepted the work you've done and recognized it on our September 14 meeting. And so it was a quasi-judicial application that we were using, and the council considered and voted unanimously for that. So for the city council, October 5th, what we did, we talk about the wastewater treatment plant that's going very well. We had the people of Aqua Nereda, who are in charge of all the technical things, have a very thorough discussion with us about what the net, if we are going to acquire net zero or not, which is not, but they will also do a plant that will be environmentally friendly, and we let Assistant City Manager Anthony continue with Mr. Ward their work, and they will continue to update us as the project is moving along, but there's a lot to do. And we also allow the city manager to continue the discussion for the LORAC, and things are moving very fast there on the Oswego Recreation and Aquatic Center as the school board accepted the terms. They accepted terms, both our terms, and we understand also where they stand on this. We also have a new director of program of the DEI, and so the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Manager, his name is Julian Del Rio. If people want to see and meet Jillian, they can come to the place over there. He was working in Portland, and she's ready to help move a lot of stuff in our DEI program. So that's mainly things that we've worked, and the city council is looking forward for your work on the code and all that. So if there is any question, I would like to excuse myself or, yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Is it good? Yes, it's back. Thank you. So thank you, Councilor Mahbub, for the update. Commissioners, are there any questions for Councilor Mahbub? I see none. All right, thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda is a public comment. This is regarding issues not on the agenda. Iris, did we receive anyone wishing to make a public comment tonight?
No, we did not.
All right, so we'll move on. Commission for Citizen Involvement, General Updates, item number 5 on our agenda. We wanted to announce that the Uplands Neighborhood Association will have their general membership meeting Thursday, October 21st at 2021 at 4 p.m. via Zoom. If anyone would like to receive a Zoom invitation, they're asked to contact Bob Irvin at bobandminion@comcast.net. This is their semi-annual meeting to discuss what's happening in Uplands. The guest speaker will be Courtney Clements, LO School Bond Chair. There'll be standing committees updates. They'll talk about emergency preparedness, land use, open spaces and recreation, transportation, trees and natural resources. They'll also go over the annual Uplands Board of Directors nominations and elections. Will be 10 general members and 4 associate officers will be elected. Nominations will be accepted by email and from the floor. They ask that you contact Board VP Brian Spar with any candidates at spahrb@gmail.com. So I encourage those who are interested in the Uplands Neighborhood Association to attend their general membership meeting on Thursday, October 21st, 2021 at 4 p.m. I didn't have any other Commission for Citizen Involvement updates. So we'll move on then to the minutes. So first on the agenda are the minutes for August 23rd, 2021. Commissioners, are there any changes or other modifications that commissioners would like to make for the August 23rd, 2021 meeting minutes?
I move that we approve them.
There's a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
There's a second by Commissioner Fisher. Discussion on the motion. So it was a quick motion. Thank you. I was going to say there might be one recommendation where it mentioned I had stated that there's a large diversity of character in the Palisades Neighborhood Association. I was thinking if we could just add maybe one word to say, that it's a very has diversity and neighborhood character, and just add the word neighborhood to the diversity, so it's specific that we're calling out it's the neighborhood character in P&A that I had spoke to. Yeah.
Is there a page?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't have the minutes. I forgot to bring them with me. But it's towards the end where it speaks to my comment that I mentioned I was part of the P&A, and I commented that there was, it was a very diverse, oh, thank you. I have them now. Seem not to be finding it right now. Oh, yeah, here it is. It's on page 2 of 3, line 25. It said that Chair Heap disclosed that he lived in the P&A himself, adding that there was a great diversity of character within the sub-areas of P&A. Yeah, between great and diversity, I'd just say great neighborhood diversity of character within the sub-areas of the P&A. So again, that's line 25 on page 2 of 3. Thank you.
I'll move to accept as amended.
Is there a second to accept the?
I second.
Thank you. All those in favor of accepting the amended motion?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. Any abstains? None. Thank you. The meeting minutes are approved. For September 27th, 2021, I believe we'll defer those meeting minutes for approval until the next meeting. They weren't quite ready right now. So we'll move on to the agenda item number 7. This is findings, conclusions, and order. This is for the flood hazard overlay, Community Development Code Amendments LU 20-0005. Public comments aren't accepted. On September 27, 2021, the Planning Commission made a preliminary recommendation that the City Council approve the proposed amendments as written in staff report and return with draft findings, conclusions, and order. The staff coordinator is Paul Espe, Associate Planner. Commissioners, were there any comments, changes, or requests that were in the findings, conclusions, and order for LU 20-0005? All right, is there a motion then to approve the findings, conclusion, and order for LU 20-0005?
Sure, I'll motion to approve.
Second.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Commissioner Stewart made a motion to approve the findings, conclusions, and order for LU 20-0005. Commissioner Leek, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? None. Any abstains? None. Thank you. The findings and conclusions and order are approved. Next on the agenda is work session. This is the Community Development Code Annual Amendments, work session number 1, LU 21-0057. Public comments are accepted. The Commission will review a list of potential amendments to the Community Development Code and provide initial input and feedback on any other needed research or information. This will also be an opportunity for the Commission to identify any additional public outreach or citizen involvement that should be undertaking. The staff coordinator is Evan Frenstead, Senior Planner. Evan, would you like to introduce us to the Community Development Code Annual Amendments?
Yes, sir. There we go. Thank you, Chair Heap. And members of the Commission, I'm Evan Franstead, Senior Planner, tasked with leading you through the 10 amendments we have this year. So here's a brief overview of the process. So we're doing the work session today. The second work session is scheduled for November 8th, and we do not yet have the PC hearing scheduled yet. Something we need to talk about and figure out. But in general, we have 5 amendments that are considered maintenance items. Those are items that generally do not involve policy considerations. And then we have 5 amendments that are policy amendments that require more public input and discussion as necessary. So the first maintenance item involves building design standards for commercial, industrial, multifamily. This is really just to clarify what has been the common practice, which has been interpreted by the DRC and other land use cases, that the building design standards for commercial, industrial, and multifamily apply to, well, the standard is, let me read it first. Buildings are designed to be complementary in appearance to adjacent structures of good design with regard to materials, setbacks, roof lines, height, and overall proportions. The practice has been that this standard of complementary really only applies to similar type buildings, that it doesn't apply to, say, commercial to single family. When you look around adjacent properties, you don't look at the single family houses around, you look at similar structures that are also subject to the standards. And that could be commercial and multifamily, but we don't want to bring in other buildings that aren't subject to these standards because it's comparing apples and oranges, basically. So that's why it's considered just a maintenance item. It's just really codifying what's already the common practice.
Excuse me, Evan, Planner Francis, would you want to say a word about that, the fact that that's a discretionary standard and that is one of 2 paths that applicants may choose from? You might want to just elaborate on that. I think it'd be helpful.
Yeah, the building design standards are discretionary. When he talks about adjacent buildings, a good design, so a good design is definitely discretionary. Yeah, it depends on this, on the application, but this is the first set of the standards. The second one, if it's part of a unified site or a multi-building site, has to integrate into those buildings into the design has to integrate those buildings into the design. And we'll talk about that more in the policy section. So that's another item on the docket tonight.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe just to bring it home, for multifamily housing, as with other types of housing, the applicant has the option of choosing a clear and objective set of standards. You're familiar with that. You've been involved in developing those standards. So that complementary to buildings of good design is the discretionary standard for multifamily housing, but there is also a clear and objective option that's not shown here because we're not proposing to change it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, the clear and objective standards will stay the same.
Well, Evan, if we can ask a question on that too.
Sure.
So is this being kind of driven for an update because that we've seen issues that people have been trying to, maybe require that buildings of different types be made complementary, so like a, commercial to a single-family building, they were trying to do that. So has there been some history for this as being kind of an issue and a misunderstanding?
Not that I'm aware of. I don't think we've ever had any applicants try to misapply it. This is staff generated
Okay,
to help staff understand correctly what it is and for the applicant to clearly spell it out in the code. Usually when we're in the pre-app phase or, trying to work on the application, there are questions about like, well, how do we apply this? What buildings do we look at? We just really want to try to clarify for the applicant.
If I can just add, I think the case that I recall was the Woodmont Park case, in which at that time there was a proposal to include a restroom facility. And so that being a park use, the question was, does the building design standard apply to it? And if so, what buildings does it apply to? And does it apply to complementary to the single-family residences around it? Well, to some degree, and obviously as the city, as the property owner, had to be some complementariness to it. But you don't make a restroom facility look like a single-family dwelling. So that kind of started the discussion. And then there was also the Lake Corp offices, and that's also surrounded by single-family and by multifamily. And so, you want it shouldn't look like a single-family home, okay? Nor should it look like multifamily. I mean, it's a commercial facility. It kind of should look somewhat distinct from that. So those two cases drove the DRC to interpret the provision as to good buildings of good design. Well, which buildings are those? And so that's how the DRC interpreted that.
thank you for the clarification. Commissioner Stewart, did you have a question?
Yeah, I guess my question is so, just so that I understand this, the idea is to clarify this so that for example, a commercial building is up for review, it's only going to be compared against similar nearby commercial buildings? Is that what we're trying to get at?
It doesn't have to necessarily be just commercial buildings. It could be multifamily or just depends on similar structures, really. I mean, we don't want to limit to just the use. A good example is a site with a bunch of buildings. And
Right, I guess, just to jump in, and I think, and there might be, and this may get into more of the policy item that we're going to talk about a little bit, but I think the simple thing to do may be just to talk about it in terms of issues of scale, right? So buildings should be complementary to other buildings of similar scale. That'll weed out, I think, having to complement a single-family residence if you're talking about a larger building because they're not the same scale. Because that's really, I think, what we're getting at, right? I mean, I think good design in a sort of an urban or just in an area, addresses scale, I think. And that may be more of a policy discussion, but that's sort of the way I see this.
Yeah, so maybe when we come back, or when you come back, Evan, we can explore different options. You know, one might relate to use, another might relate to buildings of similar form or scale. Because I can think of a few scenarios where that scale analogy perhaps would break down a little bit too. You know, if there was an
Maybe,
accessory.
but when you brought up the example of the Lake Corp, you know, that, yeah, granted, that's intended to be a commercial building. However, it's pretty close to a single-family building, so maybe it doesn't look like a single-family building, but you draw on elements of houses so that it's complementary, you know, to something that's next to it. It doesn't have to look like a house, but, you know, maybe there's items of scale from houses that you can
Yeah,
introduce into that.
Yeah,
Right.
appreciate the comment, Commissioner Stewart. I think it's going to be a challenge because there's going to be unique applications. There are going to be very site-specific challenges.
Right, absolutely. I'm just trying to figure out a way so that the applicant is not confused by something that might get too wordy, right?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Stewart. I think those are some good points, and I think this is definitely a good item to put on our list of, updates for the Community Development Code. And then we'll have to look into it and see what all the options are when we get into it. But it's a good update, and thanks for the clarifications.
Sure. Okay, moving on to item 2. This is to remove a section of the code that talks about a 180-day extension for an incomplete application. This this is obsolete. It doesn't exist in the ORS. It just needs to be removed. We don't do this anyway. It's not practice. So it's just deleting an incorrect code reference.
Yeah, the state statute provides otherwise than our code, and it prevails.
From item number 3, this is to clarify what is the setback requirement from an existing dwelling to a proposed access lane. There's been some questions lately about if it should be from the 20-foot access lane. So there's a 20-foot access easement that includes, the basic standard is, and they can come in different configurations, but is 12 feet of pavement and 4 feet of gravel shoulders on both sides, as demonstrated here. So it's 20 feet altogether. So should that 5-foot setback to the existing dwelling be from the 20-foot access lane or possibly to the pavement, the 12-foot pavement, which would be, in this case, it would be a 9-foot setback in that case. Staff is recommending that it be from the 20-foot access lane because you wouldn't want a house too close to the gravel shoulder. It doesn't make sense. This is how we've been applying it. But question came up a couple times, and for your consideration. Any questions about that? Okay.
Well, maybe just a comment. It seems that that's pretty consistent with the rest of our code for how we, set the setbacks and the easements. It's never, I believe so, measured from the actual edge of the pavement, but from the edge of the easement where those are defined. So it seems like it's bringing some good consistency to our code.
Oh, sure, like sewer easements and utility easements?
Yes.
Yeah, that's correct. Okay, item number 4. This is to fix a conflicting section of the minor variance standard. When the code was updated in 2014, there was inadvertently created this conflict in the code that where section 1 talks about that minor variances are allowed to a setback that's, the request is 20% or less of the standard. But then later in the same section, it talks about that you can get a reduction in the setback up to 50% if you're preserving a tree. So those conflict, like which one is it? Is it 20% or is it 50%? So this is really just to create, ideally probably a different section that talks about, well, first you can get 20%, and then a second section that talks about if you're going to preserve a tree, then it's 50%. So it's just to fix an inadvertent conflict. And the 5th one is to fix the definition of family. Oregon State House Bill 2583, which will go into effect January 1st, 2022, says that it has to be clear and objective, consisting of one section in the sentence. It talks about a maximum occupancy limit may not be established or enforced by any local government for any residential dwelling as defined in ORS 90.100 if the restriction is based on the familiar or non-familial relationship among occupants. So the current definition of family is an individual or two or more people, more persons related by blood, marriage, legal adoption, or associated guardianship, conservatorship, or foster care relationship, or a group of not more than 5 people not related or associated living together in a dwelling unit as a single housekeeping unit. So this definition needs to be fixed to, one way to fix this would be to remove the numbers. You couldn't have the group of 5 or more people, or the reference to individual or 2 or more people related by blood, marriage, or legal adoption, et cetera. So that's one potential fix for this. There could be others. I mean,
Evan, a question. What is House Bill 2582? Is it specifically to address just the definition of family and the issue that we're raising, kind of similar to our code tonight, or is this issue with family, just a larger issue with House Bill 2582? So maybe if you can just explain what House Bill 2582 is.
so it says 2583, and I don't know the history behind it. Evan, do you know? I'd have to do some research and find out what exactly it is.
Okay.
This is just something that came up in our ticker to fix. But yeah, in the second work session, I can give you a more, I guess, brief on it.
Sure. I think that may be useful to understand the bigger context of,
Sure.
why we're making this change and updating our community development code.
Okay.
Yeah, I can tell you that it comes from a whole package, a whole legislative package that is housing related. And the idea, I think, the intent is to open up housing tenure and not be so restrictive as to say that, you need to have not more than this number of individuals who are related in some way, that housing is housing for people. It's not housing for brothers or mothers necessarily. It's for individuals, and we can regulate the number of individuals, but I think that's what they're getting at. But I think having some of that background for your next work session would certainly be helpful.
I guess I would add, just looking at it online here, it is one section long.
That's
It
it,
is,
just one
it
sentence.
is one sentence long, and that's all it says.
Yeah.
But it's part of a package, I'm sure. But of course, I would say that this will, when it is effective, it will supersede our definition. So that will cause a conflict between people reading our code, and we'll have to tell them that's not applicable.
Yeah, there was I'm sure, a legislative concept paper behind that that would eliminate it.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving along to the policy related. So there's 5 here. I can just read them real quick. Expand Saturday market hours on Sunday. Reduce the size of boathouses and clarify setbacks. Clarify when building design standards apply to multi-building sites. So back to the building design standards. Options for online neighborhood meetings and notification of online public hearings. So that first one, to expand hours for Saturday market type uses on Sunday. So the Parks Department has requested that we take a look at this. The Mercado Grove Saturday market, it begins, they would like to expand it to begin in earlier hours. Right now it's limited to, can only start at 1 on Sundays. They would like to start at 11. So it's really, should we expand the hours, and what should the hours be on Sunday? I guess one area of discussion is maybe they should be the same as Saturday. It doesn't have to be 11. It could be different hours or the same hours. It really is just up for discussion. Any questions about that?
Maybe just one. So this would apply to all the markets that are in Lake Oswego. I think you mentioned one specific one. I thought you mentioned the Mercado market. So this would be both the Mercado market as well as the downtown farmers market too.
It would, and it would also be anything that falls under that Saturday type use. Yeah, so it wouldn't just apply to one market.
Okay,
That's as proposed. Of course, there could be a carve-out, if you will.
Right.
You could say it's the same hours except for downtown, if you find that that has locational aspects that are different than the others. So that's the reason why it's a policy.
Would it be helpful for the commission to hear from a representative of the Parks Department, either have one of the staff appear or provide a write-up, a paper on why this is necessary, or why they're asking for it?
yeah, I think definitely, commissioners, any other input on Parks? Commissioner Stewart, I believe you have a
Yeah,
comment.
just a quick question. Since we're talking about potentially doing a market now on Sunday, is there any discussion about changing the name? Just curious. Well, from Saturday market,
Just a Saturday, Sunday farmer's market?
weekend.
Weekend market?
I'm not trying to be flippant. I was just
No,
curious.
it's a good point. I guess the question is, how many times does the term Saturday market appear in the code that would require, I mean, no, we can do the housekeeping on the code.
Not that much.
That's not an issue.
Is this something that's in the works, of planning to do it also on Sunday?
Well, right now, they do it on
Oh,
Sunday.
they do, okay.
They just can't start until 1. They'd like to start at 11 if they could.
Yeah, the Parks Department in collaboration with the Mercado Grove property, they did a pilot project. It's not scheduled, so they haven't planned on, I mean, they would like to be able to have this an annual event. The pilot project, I think, was in April. It was in the spring of this year. And I think they would like to have the ability to operate a market of some kind during other times of the year too, not just in,
But it's not an every weekend, like the one down in downtown Lake Oswego?
I don't know, it may be that that's what they would like to do. I think we need to learn more about what the concept is behind this.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think to the original question, would it be useful for the commission to hear from a member of the Parks Department? I think definitely, yeah, if we could get some background information from the Parks Department. Ideally, to, come before the commission and take questions, but alternatively, if that doesn't work, then just some written background information. So you have I believe two more commissioners that would have questions. Commissioner Fisher, did you have a question? And then I'll take
Yeah,
Commissioner Buchanan next.
I suspect that if somebody from the park department comes, they'll answer the question, but have there been any complaints about existing hours? I mean, initially it sounds great, expand the hours, but with the hours that we do have there been complaints that it interferes with traffic or movement or anything?
Not that I'm aware of. Yeah, but we can certainly reach out to Parks and get a better explanation. Hopefully, maybe they can come join us for the second work session.
Commissioner Buchanan, question?
Thank you.
Yes, my question runs parallel. My question runs parallel to your question, which is, what is the rub against the extended hours? It seems like particularly the downtown would be, very much appreciate the extra hours at the Saturday market, which is a large draw for businesses and whatnot that also are open. So could be a good opportunity for them.
All right, thank you. No further questions.
Okay. So can we go back to my presentation? Thanks. Okay, for the second policy item, this has to do with boat houses. So the current maximum size for a boat house is 560 square feet. Proposal would be to limit the maximum size to reduce it to 500. This will require a Measure 56 notice and is limiting current regulations. The reason for this is really twofold. The Lake Corps currently has private standards that limit boat houses to 500 square feet. And as you know, with the most recent floodplain amendments that are going to go to City Council, it sounds like next, that allows for a variance from 200 to 500 square feet, but no more than 500. So there would be, it would meet both of those. It would be, yeah, same number.
Makes sense.
And for the setback issue, our code it's just not very clear right now. So boathouses are allowed in the 25-foot lake setback. Our common practice has always been to allow, that also doesn't apply to the side and rear setback, because they're already in the rear, and if they're side, that's still in the, it's just, and there's part of our code that's the same section that talks about adjustments, and it's kind of hidden in there. You have to know exactly what you're looking for it's the last part of that sentence. So I really think that sentence should be moved to where it talks about the boathouse maximum size, the same table, to make it clear that boathouses are allowed in the side and rear setbacks, as well as the 25-foot lake setback. Just to be clearer. Any questions about the boathouses?
No questions.
All right, so number 3, back to the, oh, we had one? Okay.
Commissioner Fisher, go ahead. You had a question.
Oh, hi. I'm sorry. Does this amendment allow for grandfathering existing boathouses if they're in violation of this?
Well, they wouldn't be in violation. They'd be, if we change it, if they're over 500 now and we change it to 500 maximum, and they complied at the code as it was written now, it'd be non-conforming, and they could be maintained as non-conforming. But it would create some non-conformities out there.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so back to the building design standards. So there's 2 parts to this. So we already talked about that buildings, new commercial, industrial, and multifamily buildings need to be complementary to adjacent buildings. The second part is if there's existing buildings on site for multifamily, multi-building sites, that they have to integrate those buildings into the design. So the question is, if you have a site with multi-buildings that isn't complementary to the other adjacent buildings, what do? Do you require the new building to be complementary to the adjacent buildings, or do you require it to integrate with the buildings on site? So the code's not very clear right now, which one you would apply.
Well, I think both apply. I mean, the argument would be both apply, or only the multi-building site applies to the multi-building location. I mean, that's the question that we need to have clarified.
Commissioner Stewart, a question?
Yeah, I would add that, and maybe it's in the code already, but when buildings on a site like this have to comply or have to be complementary to the neighborhood, is there a certain
Distance?
proximity? Are we talking about buildings that are relatively like immediately adjacent, or I'm thinking like, for example, the Merrillhurst campus, of course, is large enough where if you're in the middle of the campus, you're not really close to the neighborhood because it's a large campus. So is there any sort of qualifying distance where this comes into play?
Yeah, so the code doesn't give us any set distance. I mean, the Merrillhurst campus is an interesting case to look at. They're actually proposing a new multifamily building on that site. And for that site, I mean, you look at the adjacent properties, and they're mostly single family, and of course you have the sister's property. But it's such a large campus site that we would mostly look at to integrate the existing buildings, but you do have to meet both standards. That is a hard example because they have different styles of buildings.
Well, and it may be a bad example too, because the thing that I think about is 10 years ago, we moved a historic house onto the campus. And it's actually near the fringe of the campus, and in its existing condition, it clearly is not complementary to the neighborhood because it's a very unique house, but that could come into play, for example, if it didn't, but it could have if this, is followed. So I guess that's not really a great example because it's sort of a one-off, but,
Well, we can
it
do another
could come
example.
up.
Another example is, well, like the golf course remodel, they want to have a maintenance building. So it's an outbuilding, it's a big outbuilding, but where do you look at? I mean, there's existing buildings on site, and you have to look at complementary adjacent structures, and where do you look and how far do you go? So in that case, I mean, we told them they needed to look at other outbuildings on like the school properties and the parks across the
And
street.
I think my comments earlier should apply there where if that maintenance building is close to the neighborhood, maybe you're pulling character from the houses to create that building without making it look like a house. I mean, that could be one way to do that.
Thank you, Commissioner Stewart. Commissioner Fisher, you have a question?
I think, isn't the real example the zoning change we just made, right? Where we're proposing multifamily housing in an area that has commercial and single family. And so how does this code resolve that issue?
Well, that's the first question that we've talked about is when you have different types, okay?
Mhm.
This is a question of when you have multi-buildings on a site, are you trying to be complementary to the adjacent structures and not worry about the buildings on the site? Are you trying to integrate to the buildings on the site and not worry about the adjacent buildings? Or are you trying to do both?
Which can be hard to do.
Yeah, and you certainly have situations, as we have, where you have a multi-building site, the adjacent structures are residential. I think of a school district, school sites, type of thing. So if you're trying to be complementary to the single family, but integrate to the multi, which, that may require some balancing in order to achieve both. So that's something to think about if you're going to make them subject to both. I guess I will add, while the first standard doesn't have any distance requirement, from your conversation, I just wanted to point out the definition of adjacent structures. Adjacent means abutting or across the street. So when you have a site like Merrillhurst, if that's one lot, if you will, then there's a large adjacency to it, okay? But if you have a smaller lot, there's a smaller adjacency to it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Lee?
Thank you. I feel as though we're trying to put a square peg in a round hole, and it really depends on a case-by-case basis. And we're trying to make a blanket rule that maybe is not the way to approach this.
Well, we have to come up with some rule. So we either leave it the way it is, and the frustration the uncertainties that we have, or we come up with something else.
What would the planning department like to see?
I think staff recommendation would be that in this scenario where you have multi-buildings on a site that aren't complementary, that the new building, to try to make the new building match the neighborhood and not the buildings on site would stick out and wouldn't be the best design option, that the new building should integrate the existing buildings into their design.
Yeah, I think there might be another layer to this too. If the property is in a design district or it's in an area where we have a set of standards that are specific to that area, whether it's a commercial district or a neighborhood, that's some reflection on that design district maybe. In order that, of course, would there's some trade-offs there. So if you're in a design district and you're adjacent to a residential neighborhood that doesn't have that sort of design direction to it, if you're going to commit to, what's really the design intent of this district that I'm in, and what's the character of the surrounding buildings, then, you're intentionally moving in that direction and not reflecting so much on the scale or the character of the homes in that neighborhood. So, I don't know that you can do both very well, but maybe perhaps we can explore some options that would allow for, a decision tree or some choices to be made depending on the context, whatever that looks like. I don't have a solution, but we can explore it.
I think it definitely depends upon the context, because Lake Oswego is such a varied and diverse sets of neighborhoods that applying one standard to everything is kind of like putting a straitjacket on it. That's just my opinion.
Evan, the question is, when we think about what type of public outreach and citizen involvement process we'd like to have for that, were there any particular groups that have, kind of brought this issue to the forefront? Has it been neighborhood associations, or was it developers, or was it really just coming from the planning department and trying to give direction to anyone that's trying to do development?
Yeah, this is staff generated, but I mean, this is I think a frustration we've heard from applicants for a long time with the standards. It is hard to reconcile the two. I think it's general frustration by everyone involved with this standard.
So I think if it was maybe applicants that have applied for, as they're going through development, if there's some way we could do outreach to, that type of group of applicants and see if they could give feedback to, kind of some of the concerns we're raising here. Are we really solving the problem, or is it a problem that we can solve? I mean, that might be very useful for the commission to hear from them.
Yeah, I'll just add, I haven't sat through any of the DRC hearings where that has been an issue with the neighborhood about integration, doesn't integrate with the site, or neighborhoods. That's been resolved on the design side before I got to the public hearing.
Okay.
Yeah, so the kind of the process on this, I might look to you, Evan, on, the way that analysis is scoped. It begins initially at the pre-application stage, where staff meets with the applicant, and the neighborhood associations are invited to that meeting as well. And there's a dialogue about, what is the design context? What is the building typology? What are you proposing to do on this lot? What's the scale, architectural style, if any? And then the conversation sort of ensues from there as to what are the reference points. And I think it's a good idea actually to have that dialogue, that exchange of ideas at the pre-app stage, where it's not locked in, and there's some flexibility on the applicant's part and some ability for staff to make those judgment calls. So I don't know what I'm going to look at you, Evan. What's your experience with that? Is it, I know it's frustrating and we're not able to just point to a section in the code that tells us which direction to go, but
yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's nice to have the flexibility and have those discussions, say, well, maybe you could look at this site, look at this buildings. That could be good examples. But at the same time, I think applicants, some would like to have, well, you really need to look at that building, and the code clearly directs them. So it goes both ways.
So maybe having that follow-up, maybe just contacting a short list of applicants where that issue has been at the forefront, and we could report back to you with generally, or ask them to participate if that's something that would be helpful. But I'm kind of wary of expanding the scope on this too far, because then it becomes, really its own initiative and less so an annual CDC maintenance update. Sure. But it's up to you.
We can certainly try to create a list and reach out to people. So this doesn't apply to any of the overlays, because it's a different stand. This is just commercial, industrial building, multifamily, and without the overlay, design districts and all that. But yeah, we can certainly see what the comments are, if they can help us give us some feedback.
Sure. Thank you. No other questions?
Okay, so moving along to number 4. So during the COVID pandemic, we've allowed, during that time frame, there was a state allowance to have neighborhood meetings online. And we received some good feedback from the applicants and from some people in the neighborhood that they preferred the option to have online meetings. Some people were saying that more people participated in that because they could just, log on and participate at home. They didn't have to go to a building. So this would look at the option to allow that to happen on a permanent basis. And likewise, number 5, our current code does not allow online public hearings because it says it has to be in a place, but this would explore options to amend the code to allow the option for online public hearings.
That's after January, what's the cutoff date? I think the 1st. Oh, the 1st, yeah. So we're allowed to do it now, but
Right.
we're running out of time.
I want to make a distinction between the two, just for the commissions. The number 5, the online public hearing, the state law after January 1 will require a place where people can come to watch the public hearing. It may all be happening electronically, but a person could actually attend a place and see it, all right? That's different than number 4, which is there's no place to go. It's just strictly online. Okay.
And we can do number 4, we can do that under state law because that neighborhood meeting is not a statutory.
Right, it's not a governing body meeting.
Yeah.
So that's their own meeting. It's just under our citizen involvement guidelines under Goal 1, we provide for the neighborhood meeting process. So it's not governed by the public meetings law.
It was kind of a question I was going to have was, should the city of Lake Oswego really be legislating this at all? I mean, I think when we've had prior discussions, we say, the neighborhood associations are really kind of independently governed and separate from the city. And so this is talking about neighborhood meetings, and I assume we're referring to neighborhood association meetings.
No,
is that correct, or is this just general meetings that the cities conduct in?
This is about land use application meetings that developers would have with the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Commissioner Leek, did you have a question? Or
That was what I was trying to get at. What kind of a meeting were we really specifically talking about? And it's not neighborhood association, the Westlake Neighborhood Association, blah, blah, blah. Okay.
It's a good question. It's not apparent, but that's what we're talking about.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Fisher, did you have a question?
On number 4, why does it have to only be approved by the chair? I mean, if I'm somebody who wants it, why should the chair say no? Can we just eliminate that phrase, and does it read well? That they have the option of having an online thing, I guess, either by a majority of the people or, I seem to have a problem with that one person can make that decision.
Well, that was just one option to provide the online neighborhood meetings.
Well, in the history, if I can interrupt, the context is that the applicant contacts the neighborhood chair to schedule the meeting.
Right.
Now, and they propose 3 dates and a location and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's
So I
correct.
think the proposal that the neighborhood chair would make that call is because that's consistent with the neighborhood chair's involvement in working with the developer as to where that meeting is going to be held. Okay, I mean, your suggestion about, well, could they have a different means? Well, they certainly could, but if you're going to have more people involved, then you're going to have a meeting, and then the question is the meeting properly held by the neighborhood association to make that decision? And that's a whole nother basket of issues.
Yeah.
So either, I would say, you either let the neighborhood chair do it in his current role in working with the developer, or you say the developer can offer the opportunity for a neighborhood meeting online without getting the approval of the neighborhood chair. I mean, you can just say, I'm going to have a neighborhood meeting, and it's going to be at 6:30, and it's going to be on Zoom. I mean, that would be the other way to do it. I think having another group meeting to decide how to do it is not consistent with our current code and saying that the chair works directly to get it done.
Thank you. Commissioner Lee?
I would think the neighborhood chair would have a feel for what the neighborhood is comfortable doing, and so he represents them, and I think that that's the clearer option.
Well, we don't have to, obviously, we don't decide tonight. The question is, do you want more information? Do you want to let it run as it is and take testimony?
Commissioners, any comments? I think what I'm hearing is that we're okay with what staff has outlined in the presentation here tonight. And so, yeah, we'd like to, start with that. And then, for outreach, I guess, of course, getting confirmation both from the developers as well as the neighborhood chairs or the neighborhood associations that they would agree with this too.
Well, when you say, Chair, when you say confirmation, you'll get that in the public hearing. Is there any work you would like staff to do ahead of the public hearing to identify issues or solicit input other than publishing, the public hearing draft, which we would do?
Yeah, I wasn't hearing any specific actions for staff to do for this. Commissioners, any input on that? Any specific actions that we'd like to ask staff to take? Commissioner Lee?
I have a question for Iris. On number 5, what is your input on online public hearings? How would you orchestrate that? Some of our public hearings, every seat is filled. Would that be a gallery view or one at a time brought into the meeting?
We've done some of those already, like with
Yeah.
the Boones Ferry Road. We started off with remote only, and before it ended, we had combination of a hybrid.
Okay, so it's comfortable for you to
It's-
orchestrate.
It's difficult.
That's what I got the
But,
feeling of.
It's like anything that's new, you have to go through a learning process, and when you have a lot of different technology that you're using, you can have mishaps along the way, and so that's just kind of the risk of doing business with computers.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Iris, and I'm glad you brought that up because we've retooled, or I think we're retooling our public hearing notices so that if someone chooses to participate virtually, they're accepting responsibility if they're disconnected or for some reason beyond the city's control, that's a risk that they're taking on. Of course, they can always submit testimony in writing to back up anything that they might be presenting orally, but there are benefits and there are potential risks. Yeah.
I guess I personally feel that online public hearings are not as effective as in-person ones, and I would not be excited about making that something that is a permanent option.
Commissioners, any feedback? Yeah, Commissioner Buchanan.
Is there a way that they could have a public hearing in person and also have Zoom attendance as well? Similarly, we have one of the commissioners that's home now attending this as well. I don't know if that's an option that could work out, but it seems like it would be great for the general public.
Yeah, if I may, Commissioner Buchanan, that's exactly the direction the City Council is, I think, chosen to go, or they would like to see us go as well, and that their public hearings or public meetings, of course, are conducted in a place. They're conducted here, and they're, at least for now, they're wanting to afford that option to people to join the meeting virtually or telephonically or via Zoom, and that's just, it's opening access. Of course, there are, as I said, trade-offs, and maybe, it may not be the same as being there in person, for the presenter or the people who are receiving the presentation, but that's the trade-off.
Yeah, thank you, Director Seal. I think those are all good points, and Commissioner Lee, I'd say I kind of share your comments where, if you can have an in-person meeting, those tend to be the most effective, but the issue is that not everybody can attend, and I think then we look at how much citizen involvement we're really getting. If we're cutting people off, that their only option is maybe to attend an online public hearing. So while it may be more ideal to have an in-person meeting, I think the prospect of increasing our citizen involvement and allowing more to participate, if their only means is through doing it online, is appealing. I would say staff should pursue that. Attorney Boone, you have a
Well,
comment?
you're sort of getting into deliberation, and I just want to remind you, the question, is there any more information you need to scope out the question?
Sure.
Because you'll make this policy decision, and of course, following the public hearing, when people have an opportunity to comment.
Yeah, sure. I think that's a good point, Attorney Boone. My only concern was that if tonight we may be squashing any of these policy amendments and saying, we don't want to pursue them, and I think it is worth taking further, as you're suggesting, into the deliberations. We don't want to solve it tonight, but I think we should keep this on our list, definitely. And do commissioners have any comments on what type of additional outreach or public feedback we'd like to take? And we can hold off on the deliberations on it. Commissioner Lee?
Are there other municipalities who have gone to this platform that we can see how effective they feel it is, or is it just too new to know?
We could certainly reach out to some of our neighbors and ask them if they're intending to continue offering hybrid meetings, or assuming they've returned to in-person meetings, how they're handling that.
I think the city of Portland is still doing in-person meetings, aren't they?
In person, I'm not sure.
I will do some research, and get back to you.
Not that if somebody else does it, we should do it or we shouldn't do it, but it'd be interesting to know.
Or more importantly, are there any pitfalls? Are they encountering any problems that perhaps we haven't experienced
And I
yet?
would also like to point out, there will be some people who are not technically savvy enough to orchestrate Zoom meetings, and maybe that's something we should take into consideration. I'll be quiet now.
This would allow them the option, to join by phone too, in different forms.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Under state law, again, I think the question that is posed here is whether the testimony and the attendance by the decision makers will be strictly online. Again, state law requires there to be a location in which people can attend. Since people can submit written comments, I think it would be legal to tell them, if you have attending doesn't give you the right to comment at the time, you can submit your written comments, but we don't have to make it available for you to give hybrid type comments into that. So people could legally, I think, attend here, submit the written comments, and then watch what's happening. Now, probably the public would not favor that. Okay, so what you're really asking is whether you're going to have hybrid meetings. Okay, it isn't a strictly online, totally online meeting. That'd be my sense of it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess that would be an ask then of the commission as we go out and we do public outreach on this issue, that it's very clear what we're asking for, and if it's hybrid meetings, that we kind of state that it's hybrid, it's just not online only. Commissioner Stewart?
Yeah, this may be a little bit out of the box in that, but on Wednesday this week, I'm attending via WebEx a public meeting for a zone change in the city of Fort Worth, and I know that's outside of Oregon, but that meeting is set up exactly the way we're talking about, where you can attend in person or you can attend via Zoom. So I don't know if that might be, I don't know if you want to reach out to them or not, but I know they've been running meetings that way for a while now.
And I guess to be clear, we have run meetings all online. The HRAB hearing we have on Wednesday for the Carmen House is online.
Yeah, we've been conducting hybrid meetings ever since we were allowed back in the building. So it's something, we just don't know if that's something that the community that the commission and council would want to continue to offer, I think, beyond January 1st. Is that, that's the issue?
I would just echo, and from the applicant's point of view, I think that's harder, more challenging too, to present a project via Zoom versus in person, because you miss the opportunity for inflection and things like that. So it's I think in a lot of ways it's a disadvantage of both sides. But anyway.
Right, thank you. So I think what we've said is that, you know, it would be helpful if staff could share some lessons learned from any other communities, see what some of the pitfalls were, share that with the commission. Any other requests for public outreach or the process we'd like to follow? No? All right, thank you.
And those are the 10 items. It sounds like we want to move forward with all 10. And I guess the question is next steps for the second work session.
Yeah, so tentatively, we had set aside, or we had reserved November 8th, so that's 2 meetings from now, for a follow-up study session. So I would ask Senior Planner Francis if, you know, if that would provide enough time. We're really looking at about 2 weeks, I think, to gather that information, or if you would need more time, which I think we can work with the schedule and work with the chair on that. But
It seems reasonable. Reaching out to developers to see how they feel about the building design standards might take some time.
Just maybe a question, just the timing of this in our schedule. You know, as we go forward and we look at our 2020 goals, there's some thoughts to say, you know, should we hold off on this? I mean, could there be, you know, some public input that says, yeah, maybe these 10 that the commission are looking at tonight, the commission says these are good maintenance amendments and policy amendments that we feel like should be worked on. But there's maybe an opportunity that the you know, community may have other, you know, items that could be maintenance amendments or policy amendments they see. I assume those would be separate than goals that we'd look at, and those would be individually looked at.
yeah, so Chair Heap, in the goal-setting process that you've led previously, and what we've suggested doing again this year is putting out a call to the community for any planning or zoning, you know, and code-related initiatives that they would want to see you work on. So, you know, those could include, you may get feedback that is on the order of annual code amendments, and those suggestions would get placed on the docket for 2022 annual CDC amendments, like what we're talking about this evening. There may be proposals from neighborhood associations or individuals, or really from anywhere, that are more policy driven. It could be a neighborhood plan, or it could be, you know, we think we should be looking at this section of the code that deals with a specific set of land use requirements. And then that would be prioritized by the commission, and then direction provided from city council as to whether, you know, that should be a 2022 project or initiative. And then we would develop scope and you know, and resources, staffing around that. So there is the opportunity, both, you know, in the annual CDC amendments process and in the goal setting for those larger projects, for the community to weigh in and say, we think that these are the priorities for the city this year. As for the 2021 amendments, these were, obviously, we started developing the list earlier in the year, and it's a relatively short list, but there's some, you know, potentially significant changes. And I think what we'd like to do is, you know, fulfill the commission's request for scoping and for input on those changes that you were asking for input on, and then come back this year with those, because they are 2021 amendments. Now, if they go to a public hearing in the beginning part of 2022, that's fine. That's not uncommon. We've seen that, you know, done before. But what we try to do is avoid sort of overlapping or one set of amendments sort of passing the other, and then they're no longer, you know, annual code changes, and we're on a different path. Anyway, so that's the suggestion, and we're open to your direction on this.
No, I think what you outlined makes sense, Director Siegel. Commissioners, any other comments on the schedule? No? Yeah, so I think the kind of schedule and the process that the staff has outlined looks good for the commission.
And we could, Chair Heap, if I may. So I was looking ahead at the forecast, and, you know, we had targeted November 8th for the next work session on this, but I think if Planner Franstead could use another, 2 weeks, or another week, actually, it might be worth investing that time, and then having this item come back on the 22nd of November, where you don't have any other large business items. It looks like you've got findings that may be brought to you on a hearing that's yet to be held, so.
Okay.
If that works for everyone, for the commissioners.
Sounds very reasonable. Commissioners, any concerns?
Does that work for your schedule, Evan?
That's great. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think commission finds that's fair, yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you, Planner Franstead, for giving us the update on the code annual amendments.
Yes, you're welcome.
Next on our agenda is other business. Any other business? And then schedule review. Director Siegel, anything that you'd like to give us as far as an update on the schedule review?
Thank you, Chair Heap. Just mentioned that October 25th is your next meeting. You've scheduled the first of 2 work sessions on goal setting. We've been in contact about sending an announcement out to community organizations, neighborhood associations, and others about the goal setting, so soliciting input ahead of the 25th, and then certainly there'll be time after that first work session for the public to provide additional input before the commission is asked to finalize its recommended goals on December 13th. Then your next meeting following the 25th would be on November 8th. There's a public hearing tentatively scheduled on urban service boundary amendment for the Receipt property. That's the city-owned park and open space property at the corner of Atherton and Stafford Road. After that, you've got the second work session on annual code amendments that we just discussed, and then into December, actually backing up, the middle of November, November 16th, there's a joint study session scheduled with the commission and the city council to discuss the Middle Housing Code Advisory Committee's recommendations on House Bill 2001, which Commissioner Leek has served on that committee. So that's that rounds out November, and then, as I had mentioned, December 13th would be your final meeting of the year.
All right, thank you, Director Siegel. Commissioners, any comments or questions on the schedule? None? All right, thank you. With that, we'll adjourn. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.